Welcome everyone today to Learn from Leaders. Our series is sponsored by Dworkin and Bernstein, and it is organized by the Business Management Department here at Lakeland Community College. This is our opportunity. Learn from Leaders is our opportunity where we learn from local leaders who share insights and their success advice. I'm Connie Golden. I'm business management faculty and also the department chair. And on behalf of myself and my colleague, Professor Gretchen Skoke DeSanto, we welcome you and thank you for joining us today. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest leader today, Pamela Kurt. First, it's really important to note that Pam is a Lakeland graduate. Yay! After graduating with her associate degree from Lakeland, Pam continued her education at Cleveland State. She earned her bachelor's degree in urban studies, and then she went on to enroll in Cleveland Marshall College of Law's dual degree program. She earned her master's in public administration and her Juris Doctorate. As an attorney, her specialty is family and juvenile law. She is very active in the community, serving as a board member for multiple organizations, and I'm just highlighting a few, including the Willoughby Chamber of Commerce, the McKinley Outreach Center, and Forbes House. She's past president of the Lake County Bar Association and is a Lakeland Hall of Fame recipient. In addition to having her own law firm, she founded a company, Best Version of You, and she's also an author. So we are going to begin today's interview by asking Pam if you would expand a little bit on your introduction and give us an overview of your education, the history of your career, a glimpse into what inspired you to start your own business and your own organization, Best Version of You. So welcome,
Sure.
Pam.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It is an honor to come back to Lakeland. Anytime I can give back to Lakeland, it's hard for me to say no. Don't use that in the future, I guess.
I was going to say, good to know.
But I just adore Lakeland. I've been on Lakeland, the foundation committee, and as a former member of the Hall of Fame, I'm pretty involved in that as well, and I enjoy it very much. So Lakeland is something that I don't think everybody realizes until you've gone through it and you look at other counties on what an amazing establishment and how it's such an advantage for Lake County residents as well as the area around. You know, it's something that the 2+2 thing was, I was like one of the first people beginning that whole process when I went on to Cleveland State. So I was very grateful that it's continued, and I know there's more opportunities out there now. I went back to school at Lakeland as a single mom. And it gave me the flexibility to be able to do all that's involved between working and everything else. In addition, once I got to Cleveland State, as you stated, I went there, I finished my bachelor's, I just kept going until I was done, kind of thing. And even in my bachelor's at Cleveland State, it gave me an opportunity. I remember I took one of the bachelor's classes at at the main campus at Lakeland. And the idea was, as I went back to school, I was a very young mom. I decided to go back to school because I wanted to make sure that I could take care of myself and my son for the rest of my life. And I do still feel that education is the key to that. The reason I have my master's in public administration because while I'm in that ideal thought process, I wanted to save the world, right? And I have my concentration in nonprofit. And so I had written, your thesis for your master's, and I did a lot of nonprofit work, and it's always been something that's kind of pulled at me in the background. And initially, when I graduated, I started to work for the city of Cleveland, and I worked in a non-traditional role with a dotted line to the legal department, but also in community relations. Again, that's kind of where my background's always been, is the community, nonprofits, that type of area. And we did fair housing, which at the time, predatory lending, 2008, all of that started to bubble up. And so it was definitely a hot topic. I've lived in Lake County, 20 some years now. I moved here to be closer to Cleveland State to go. And the whole idea, as I was going through that process, again, was a way to make a better life for me and my son. And when I was at the city of Cleveland, I got to the point where I have a law degree. I was writing a lot of legislation. I was doing a lot of grant writing work, and I just wanted to fully utilize the law degree. And I went out on my own, and I also substitute taught in Lake County. And so I kind of juggled the two, and it was like, okay, God, what am I really supposed to do? And the business kind of just picked up and really started to flourish. And so I've been in business for myself with Kurt Law Office, and since early 2009, kind of started around 2008. And right before COVID, I could kind of feel another shift, and I started to just kind of look and dig a little deep. And this is how Best Version of You kind of evolved. During COVID, there was a lot of webinars, a lot of other platforms that were used, and I took a lot of classes, and I found there was a lot of women out there, and I just started to look at my own life. And one of the best things that I love that about the law practice is that I'm able to help people and make a difference. And again, I know that sounds very idealistic, but it is true. It can happen. You just have to realize that a lot of times we can only help one person at a time. I think when I came out of law school, I wanted to make all these huge changes, and it's little bits at a time. And so Best Version You, I really dug deeper because in some clients, when I see them, as you mentioned, I do family law, divorce is the worst time in your life. So when they come to me, they're not in their best, and we almost have to reinvent them and find out what their meaning is. And that gives me the most passion. Like, how can I help you? How can I take you to that next level? And how can we do that? And I don't have that relationship with all the clients because some cases maybe aren't that deep or that emotional and that trying, but that's what makes me happy. And so when I started the other company, I started to develop that in a way to empower women, and it's definitely taken off. I have some affiliate coaches. I actually started a coaching program. I've co-authored many books, and it's other with groups of women. And again, it's about collaboration with women and not competition. And just there's so many ways out there to empower women. And so I've kind of used that company, which is newly formed, just a couple years old now, as that platform.
That's great. Well, you're certainly very busy. You're professionally very busy, but you're also very active in the community. So I'm curious as why is being active in the community important to you? And we'll talk later about work-life balance, but why is being active in the community important to you? And then how do you decide which organizations to become active with?
Sure. I think that's a great question. I think that in the business sector, for sure, a lot of times if you're in a private sector, you don't think you need to be involved in nonprofits or chambers because you're in the private sector, you're working for somebody, and you just go in, do your job, that kind of thing. Some of the larger companies have employee, I'm just thinking like Lincoln Electric and Lubrizol, they send people to Leadership Lake County. I'm a graduate of Leadership Lake County, but and the reason they're involved in nonprofits and in the community to me is for all of us to continue to build each other up. And you meet a lot of people, and that networking is something that I know Lakeland stresses to their students, but not all colleges do that. And that whole networking and giving back and just being part of your community is very important just in your development as a person, as well as your business and your structure and just the presentation and the things you learn are invaluable. I think that in the business courses, we always think about the Chamber of Commerce. Well, if you're a small business or a solo entrepreneur of any kind, the Chamber of Commerce has so many free resources. There's so many networking opportunities, and it also helps you build and you grow as your career. As your business changes or evolves, there's other things. And that leads to, other nonprofits or other opportunities. So I think it's important to kind of find what you're passionate about and maybe just volunteer somehow to give back, because I firmly believe that when opportunities are presented, there's a reason for that. And I think if you put yourself out there, you can avail yourself to many opportunities. And you don't have to say yes all the time, but I do think that things that pull at your heartstring, it's important for you to give back for your own emotional well-being as well as the community.
That's great. And so you're a business owner, an author, a founder, a community activist. So you wear a lot of hats. And from your perspective, what do you consider to be leadership best practices that have enabled you to be so successful in all that you're doing?
I think some of the leadership practices are very basics that probably a lot of people say, from John Maxwell to just, other entrepreneurs and people that study. It just comes down to a lot of simple things. Do unto others as you would want to be done, or have done. I never ask staff or anybody else I'm working with to do something I wasn't or am not willing to do myself. And you always have to remember that the people that you're working with in a leadership role, whether that's in a nonprofit, those actual clients, your staff, your employees, fellow attorneys or colleagues in a business setting, they're humans too. And so sometimes people just are not having the best day. So sometimes your communication and how you read people is very key, because I might come in the office, I might say something, and if somebody's not in the best of mood, that might just be the thing that set them off. So you need to be sensitive to people in the workplace. And as a leader, you get a good read on the people and you look at them. What are their best skills? What are their weaknesses? And you try to always complement those things and try to continue to move, the business forward. I think that as a leader, sometimes it's hard, because in hard times, I think you have to be more stoic, and emotionally, maybe you're crumbling, especially when it came to the pandemic. I know a lot of leaders face this. We had a lot of changes. Offices had to close. We had to decide who's going where. But I could go home and be in a place where, oh my gosh, everything's crazy. But as a leader, you need to show that composure, because they're they're looking at you and counting on you to give any answers and those kinds of things, moving forward, the next step in the direction. And I have to say that I know a lot of small business owners were in a mode of unknown and uncertainty. I think the whole country was. But I think that as a leader, you need to show that I might not have the answer, but we're going to find the answer. And to try to have your emotions and those things kept to yourself. There's other ways and outlets to do that. But as a leader, you need to show that you're going to find an answer, even if you don't, and be willing to admit if you don't have an answer. I think it's important to, I do this. I know that in some big companies they do this, but I've just always done it, is that when you come into the office, if you are a leader, to acknowledge anybody else who's there. Like if you're a leader and you just go from your car into the building, into your office, shut the door, I mean, it's just not a good way to have a working relationship and open communication. I think it's those little things of saying, thank you and good morning and things to people. Again, golden rule and idealistic things, but those little things go a long way in building the relationships. And as a leader, you want those relationships to flourish, because you want to have that loyalty of that person and to continue. I've never had a situation that I didn't want somebody to be able to take my position. I think that's very key for a leader. You always want the best for your people. And if you train them to replace you, then that means you go up a level too. And I just think that we need to continue to compliment people. Again, find out what their strengths are, maximize that. If they're weak in data entry, then that's probably not the task that you would give them to do. So I just think it's very important to remember as the interpersonal skills that, remember they're human, and that you're the leader and it's your job to motivate them to the next step and always present things the best you can in a positive light.
Okay,
That was
great.
a long-winded answer.
No, that was a great answer. Multifaceted. Thank you. So what role have mentors or role models played in your career?
I think that for me, I know when I speak at the Best Version You type seminars and I talk about, how I've evolved to where I'm at, I grew up very poor. I grew up, my father died when I was young, and everybody has these kinds of stories, right? I mean, I told you I was divorced, a single person. That's why I went back to Lakeland. And you have those stories, and it kind of makes you who you are. And what I realized is that when I was in Lakeland versus Cleveland State versus starting opening a business, or even now, my mentors evolved. And, now I want to be somebody like Tony Robbins and Oprah, and I want to be at that level of inspiration. And I think that we have to keep an open mind. Like a lot of times people say their role models are their parents, and that's a great start. And you should. But whatever your passion is, find somebody who's doing that the way you would like, and find them and try to mimic them and use them as a role model. The one thing that I would say is a caveat to that, it's taken me time to know, is that I'm different than even my role model. So everything they do isn't always going to be in line with what you want. So sometimes have more than one role model to, to fit rather the different needs and that types of things. The biggest thing I lean on instead of actual like role models and like parents or humans, I guess, is that I always say that I work without a net. Because for me, growing up, I didn't have a rich husband. I don't have this rich family. I have to work for everything. And I think that demographic is a lot of Lakeland students. And, we have to work, we have to go to school, and you have to manage all of that. So for me, I always said my safety net was me and God, and I've always relied on that to be a huge role in my life, not necessarily maybe a role model, but if it didn't feel right, or if opportunities again like presented themselves, is that something I would kind of monitor to see if that felt right and how to move forward. I think role models are important. I think that they're ever changing depending on what your particular aspiration is in that season of your life. So
That's a great perspective. Thank you. So we talk a lot about communication skills to our students. And so we're interested in what communication skills you feel are important to develop, and then some of your suggestions for how to go about developing those skills.
I think the communication skills, communication needs to be as concise as possible and as short as possible. And I think everyone says that from maybe high school or middle school, like when you're writing and that type of thing. And you need to learn to write not as you speak, because as we speak and we have connectors, we will say so, or, these pauses. That's not how you write. So I think, see, I just said so. As you communicate, it's very important for written communication versus verbal communication. If it's a written communication, again, you don't literally write as you speak, but you want to be as concise as you can. Extra words just make things unclear. And I know sometimes conversations or potential things you have to write, or when you have to communicate to someone, especially an employee-employer relationship, or just even in your own life, it might not always be the best. So sometimes people try to skate around it and that kind of thing. I am a person that I do believe being direct, gentle if you need to, but direct is best, because if you add more, it just adds, again, layers of confusion. And I think that being as short as you need to be is good too, because it allows you to get those things out. But then also, if you're going to present your position, another key to communication is you have to listen. Because if you're not listening, you're not going to, people hear and see things differently as we perceive them. And so if you're presenting something, I think you should take the time once you present it to kind of stop and listen, because you want to hear how they actually heard something. And I know some counselors or some, other people will say, well, what I hear you saying is, and then you repeat it back. And I think that's a good trick or a tool that sometimes is beneficial in certain situations. So I think communication needs to be open and honest. I think it needs to be short. I think there's a difference between written and verbal communication. And I think you have to, again, keep in mind that everybody's human, and be kind in your words, and try to go from there.
Okay. So we have touched on the topic of networking just a little bit earlier on, and it is something that we feel is important, and we want our students to build their networks. So what suggestions do you have for our students for successfully building their networks?
I think it's important to build networks, as you mentioned. You can build networks in a nonprofit setting, in a school setting, in a business setting. One of the things that was hard for me, believe it or not, is that I didn't want people to really know who I am, or, hey, I'm Pam Kurt. Hey, I'm Pam Kurt. It almost feels uncomfortable. And I think that it's important for you to take that step, because people are going to want to know who you are. And especially if you're aspiring and you're in college and you're trying to make these steps, it is important because your name and your reputation and who you are is going to stand out. And so you want to be that person that people remember. And in a networking situation, even if it's a family event or it's somebody you don't know, I know it's hard to be outgoing and sometimes it doesn't always feel comfortable, but it is important because the more you network, opportunities will come to you and in ways that you would have never thought, 3 people over you've introduced yourself to or something like that. Again, I think that networking piece is important, and it ties into community because if you're really passionate about something, maybe you're passionate about animals and you volunteer at the Humane Society and you happen to be volunteering while you're there, and then of somebody who was going to start a new business doing something you like because they were there to get a dog. I mean, that's how things usually develop. And Lake County is large, but it's also small. So if you're able to be involved in things that are passionate or even just put out what your interests are, there's a lot of people in Lake County that if they know that this is the person, they'll even come reach out to you. Oh, you're interested in this type of work or you're interested in this. There's a lot of people that are very willing to be mentors, and it's important to be out in the community in some of those organizations to be able to do that.
So we've established you're a very involved and very busy person professionally, and you volunteer and you're an author and writer. And so what suggestions do you have for obtaining or maintaining a work-life balance?
So I actually have a seminar on work-life balance for attorneys that I've been doing. And then I did a couple at the different libraries locally. And the one caveat I'll say is that I'm very good at preaching it, not as good as practicing it. I do know that work-life balance is super important. I beat myself up for not doing this a lot. I think that for me, sometimes in the different books or whatever, I talk about this as well because work-life balance is very important. However, it means something different to everyone else. So if you work for yourself or you're in a job that's salary and you're working over 40 hours, sometimes work-life balance is bringing it back down to 40 hours. And then, knowing that you have the rest of the week and the evenings or, whatever your shift is to do stuff for your family or do stuff for you. I also think work-life balance is something that, again, it's different for every person, but it depends on what you're yearning for and what you're looking for. So if you ideally find that job that you're so passionate about, the saying going to work isn't like work because, I'm doing something I love, you still need to take time to recharge to do what you love. And so there still needs to be that level of balance. So sometimes work-life balance isn't necessarily 40 hours a week, 30 hours a week. I do yoga 2 hours. I meditate for 2 hours. It doesn't have to be a math thing. It has to be what fills you inside so that there's a level of balance. And when I do the work-life balance seminars, that whole wheel of life that I think all of us could Google and look at and all the different areas, where are you on those areas? And sometimes you forget, and the quickest thing we forget is our own health. And some of the things I bring up in the work-life balance is that, again, I'm really good at preaching it. I have to remember to practice it myself. But if we don't have anything to give, you can't give to anybody else. And I think sometimes we just run and run and run, and it's hard to take a minute for yourself. I know that there's a lot of good things you can do for work-life balance just to get your mind settled and to be able to thrive in what you do. Get good sleep. We should pray, we should meditate, we could journal, we could take bubble baths, all those things. And those are things you could do. However, self-care isn't always a bubble bath. Self-care sometimes means we just shut our phone off and take a break. Sometimes to get some of that work-life balance, just so you're rejuvenated, it really is like no electronics for today. Or maybe today I'm just going to do something I want to do. And that day of just doing what you want to do, while it sounds simple, if you're really busy, that's really hard. And then you realize that one day usually feels like a week. And so you need to have that time to rejuvenate. One thing that, like a lot of other gurus from Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins, all those different gurus. I read a lot of their different tools and techniques. And one thing they always say, take a quiet moment and count. And it's very highly recommended you meditate. It helps you set for work-life balance. That's very hard for me. And so what I tried to do and what I've been passing along is sometimes all I can get is maybe 5 seconds. There's no Mel Robbins 10-second rule. There's no 2 hours of meditation. If I get 5 seconds, just sit in the car, and sometimes that's where it's at, or just walk away from situations, it still gives you enough balance and you're able to kind of decompress a little bit, because 5 seconds really can be a long time. If you're away from electronics, and you're just by yourself. And sometimes you need to do that just to step away. So I think work-life balance is different for everybody, but you have to realize what your priorities are. And everybody's priority needs to be their own health. Because again, if you don't have it, you can't give it away. And then, of course, your own spiritual priorities, your family, work. And I know there's a lot of cliches that say, when somebody passes away, they never wish they had one more day of work, or if you die at your desk and everything like that. And so you just have to put things in perspective. I think that's hard when we're running and running and running. And it's something that's just every day. If you could just, whatever your own practice is, whether that's journaling or prayers or meditation, you just need to take the time to do that, to put things in perspective for you and to be the best you. I have a friend of mine owns Chick-fil-A, and she would talk about how customers get so upset, about chicken. And I'll like, oh, all my clients are mad because they're in a divorce. And so I get like mine's a little different because it is a life-changing event. But she's like, you have to remind people, like, this is just chicken. And I started to think about it, and I thought, well, you know what? To me, when we're going through divorce and everything, and there's children and there's money, it did help me a little bit, because most of the time the things people fight over, you'd be surprised. I mean, yes, you hear terrible stories, but it's like the $10 crock pot or these things, just, to get back. So I've kind of like, hold on, I don't sell chicken, but I can come to a place that, let's put this in perspective. Like, your mental health is worth more than fighting for a $10 crock pot, or in any situation to be upset about the chicken at Chick-fil-A or whatever the situation is. It's just, is it worth the energy? And I've picked up tools and traits. One of my friends, who actually is also a Lakeland grad, and she's now a PSYD, she does therapy one-on-one with people. And I just thought, oh my gosh, how draining. Because I know when I'm really in a case after case, some days that emotional, it's drained. And how do you balance and, recharge yourself for your real life, if there is one, after work? And she said she started telling her clients that every day she starts with 50 marbles. And each client, depending on how draining it is or whatever the task or the discussion, she has the little marbles. So she has this one lady that calls almost every day. And she said, well, I told her today her problem's a 20 marble problem, and I only have 10 left, so she's got to call back tomorrow. So I'm not saying to do that, because it's probably not the best customer service, but it does put in perspective. Like, each day we can only do so much. And you've heard people say that it's not within my bandwidth today. And that's true. That's really true. Like, your body and your mind can only do so much. So big projects, mapping them out, trying to plan, talk to other people. But anytime you feel overwhelmed, and I think this was a hard thing for us in COVID, it is good to have human interaction, right? To either decompress, just walk by, because you can feel the energy, and just kind of like calm yourself down. And in COVID, we were all feeling these anxiety, and everybody was kind of stuck to themselves. So I think that work-life, again, balance is probably a little different for everybody. But whatever makes you more centered and feel content about doing what you're doing, life's too short not to. So I think that work-life balance is very important to achieve that as well.
So that's really good advice. And I think from now on, I'm just going to keep in my mind, it's only chicken. It's just
Right.
chicken.
Right.
Be kind to yourself.
Exactly.
So in your professional journey, can you think of one thing, maybe two, I don't know, but one thing in particular that you would change if you could? One thing that you've done, or one action or direction that you would change if you had the opportunity to do so?
I think two things. And I think that that's why, to me, it's really important to talk to Lakeland students. I remember when I was in Lakeland, one of my friends said they were going to go to law school. And again, I was in my 20s. I had just gotten divorced. I was scared. And I was like, law school, my God, we can't even get through Lakeland. What are you thinking? But that little nugget in my mind, held, because obviously I went on and I finished my degrees. But I do think if there was anything, I would do things sooner in my life. And I would have done them because sooner if I would have had the confidence. Like some people, like we talked about role models, and some people's parents are like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. I hope I'm that parent to my son, although he does crazy things. But not everybody has that background, right? Not everybody has that adult mentor or a parent or a grandparent. So I think that knowing that the students signed on, knowing that you enrolled in Lakeland, you have the ability to truly be whatever you want to be. And I think that I would have tried to do things earlier, and I would have tried to get the confidence. At that time, I didn't even know it was confidence probably that I was missing, but to be who I want to be and to do it. So I think that I kind of waited because I was waiting. Well, maybe I'll wait and, until we see what happens at the city, or maybe I'll wait till my son gets older, or I'll wait. And there is different seasons in your life. And so your desires and passions change. But I think the biggest thing for me is if it's a burning desire in your heart to do something, start working on doing it, because it's there for a reason. It's just not there. And by networking and meeting people, like, things do fall in place. The problem is they don't come as fast as we would like. But they do come in, they eventually, I think, you find your way, and it's not usually the way you thought you would get there, but you do get there. And so I think I would start things first instead of waiting and being so cautious, because I was so afraid. And I would also just encourage other people to start sooner and to have the level of confidence, because you're kind of already doing it. Like, you're in school, you're doing it. So whatever it is you're afraid of, you probably have the tenacity and the ability to do it anyways. And I think that's something we need to be reminded, because you get afraid to do that.
That's great advice. So tell us about a decision professionally that you are most proud of.
I really do believe it was starting my own law firm. It has opened the doors for me to do a lot of things. And a lot of times when I'm in the trenches, I forget that what it is to do that. My law firm is definitely small now compared to what it was. I started in Wickliffe. I mean, I've grown. I had 15 lawyers at one time, and we had 4 different locations going. And lawyers are hard to manage. I always say they're worse than kids, but they are hard to manage. Um, and it's been fun because, I love everybody at Dworkin and Bernstein, and I'd always say, oh, I'm going to be bigger in Dworkin and Bernstein, and I'm just chasing and I'm just chasing. And I probably could have got there. But the reality is that I'm content with the clients that I have. And when you start to grow so big, now you become more just in management, and I have to do operations and administration. And it's hard to balance both. Um, and as people left, I have people that left me that went to become a judge or moved out of state or became prosecutors, or, they moved on in their careers. I just never really replaced them. And we just kind of started downsizing, and then with COVID. So I think that the law office, by me having that, it gave me the flexibility to experience so many things, and also to help so many different people. And as the law office, we used to do them before COVID, and we've kind of done a couple. So we'll probably be back, I would assume, in full swing next year. But I go to all the libraries, and we'll just talk maybe about landlord tenant law or child support law or different areas of law. And again, it's a way for me to give back through the guise of the law firm. So the law firm has just allowed me to have so many opportunities, and opportunities for the people that work for me. I've seen people, we've gone through college, they've turned into attorneys. It's our efforts, and it's hard for me to believe, but like, yeah, like, I'm providing for their families, and we always, before COVID again, but we used to always go to Indians games, captains games, monsters games. We really became a big family. And I think that opening the law firm allowed me, again, to help individuals and clients, but also to help a lot of other people. And so I think that's probably the best decision. It was scary because, like I said, I was scared, and I maybe have a client or two, and was substitute teaching at the time, and I was like, okay, God, what am I supposed to do? And then the phone really just never stopped ringing, which it's still, I have to unplug it as we're sitting here. So it's okay. It's a good thing.
And that's great testimony to your leadership as well. So yeah,
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
so as we are getting ready to conclude, if you could give us some advice that you would offer to our students, to our future graduates, that you wished someone had shared with you when you were about to graduate from Lakeland, what would that advice be?
I think it kind of goes back to a little bit about what I was saying, but I think that my advice would be is to follow your heart and your passion and have the confidence to continue down that path, because there's so many things. And if they're graduating from Lakeland, then you're able to do it. And that to me is the biggest piece, and find people to help you get there. But I just, if it's in your mind, you can do it. And I think, especially now they've graduated, you're kind of afraid, like, okay, I have my degree. Now what do I do? I've went on some interviews, and if it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. Definitely do what you're passionate about. And it's taken a long time for me to evolve to kind of clarify that in my own journey. And even the best version you, that's how it kind of all developed. So there is a specific coaching program that I did for the clients of that. It's called Dream, Believe, and Achieve. And it's 3 different components, because I want you to think, if money and time is no object and we wake up tomorrow, what would you do? And it's usually not what we do every day, 9 to 5, right? So how do we get there? And then I think as graduates, start to think about that, because you're starting to lay your path down. And again, things don't happen overnight, but be confident that you can get what you desire. I'll just tell you a quick story. So I used to always say that to my divorce clients, because you're restarting your life. And I'm like, if money and time is no object, what would you do? And so some people go really deep. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up in the sunset on the beach, or, and I'm like, okay, now I'm talking about your career, but whatever. So, it depends. Well, I had a couple that divorced in their late 70s. It was second and third marriages, and it really wasn't long term, so it wasn't sad. I've done some sad ones too, but I was just, asking her the question, because she seemed a little distraught and upset. And she says, I want to be an astronaut. And I was like, oh no, I've asked this question for years. Now I can't use this question anymore, because she's 70 something. How am I going to say, you can go to school at night, you can be it? And so what it made me do is stop and realize, sometimes the desires we have in our mind and our heart, maybe there's something about that intrigued you, but like, really, what is it about? So I asked her, well, what about it being an astronaut? And she said, well, I like the fact that I could, be no gravity. I could be just floating around. I could look at stars. And ultimately, the good part is, and a few years later, is that like her grandchildren took her to Orlando, and she was able to do that NASA thing, and she was able to meet the goals. But for me, I really took so much away from that, because there's so many times we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, I wish I did this and this. Well, do you really? Like, what is it about that in your core that you like about that, and start working towards that, because you'll probably end up even in a better place than what you can imagine. So that's kind of what really took off on the other business, because I'm able to do that with some of my divorce clients, and I want to be able to do that with anybody. So, and I want women to feel that strength of doing it and being able to move to the next level, whatever that means for them. So
it's great. That's great advice. And that she accomplished her goal just in a different way.
Exactly.
That's a great story. So before I turn this over to Gretchen to facilitate the questions and answers, our attendees today are a mix of a lot of different majors. There's a lot of Gretchen students who are entrepreneurs, and I think you've spoken a lot to entrepreneurship and starting your own business. there's a lot of my students that are marketing students. And so I would just like to hear a little bit of your insight on the role marketing has played in building your business and building the law firm and just how you've used marketing or at the beginning and now, if it's different.
I would say it's definitely different. I think everybody's is a little different just because of COVID and different, means and things that were open versus not. I think that marketing is super key, and it's kind of hard when you're a marketer. I didn't have a boss that I had to sell this to, but when you're trying to tell somebody, no, we need to do this or we need to buy this, then they ask you as a boss, what's the ROI on it? Let me tell you, most lawyers don't even know what that means. But I didn't have a boss, right? So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to do it and let's see. And, and residual outcomes would happen if you sponsor an event or something like that. So I think that marketing is very key. You have to find out what it is you're looking for. So for me, when I initially opened Kurt Law Office, again, I have this idealistic image that I wanted to save the world. To me, it was about, I reached out. I was unsure of logos. I believe Lakeland had some students, and I kind of used part of what one student did or something from a logo, but that's still what we have. I met with a group of ladies that also own businesses. We kind of did like our own mastermind, and we came up with Fairness, Justice, Solutions, which is our tagline. But the premise I started it was because I wanted people to be able to come to Kurt Law in all the outside communities of Cleveland, because I had driven to Cleveland for over a decade now between school and work. And I wanted them to be able to walk in and feel like they're still getting that big law firm help, with everyday people being able to get the help. So you weren't intimidated. You didn't have to drive downtown. I wanted to be lawyers that were down to earth and for everyday people. So for me, it was very important for the community component. So I need us to be at different events or soccer games or, chamber events and just network with everyday people. And we've done marketing when we opened the Ashtabula office, and I think it was 15 or 16, like we were in the Grape Jamboree Parade and we gave out grape frisbees or whatever. So I think that marketing's key on the image you're trying to build. And you don't get an immediate result. I mean, that's just part of marketing sometimes, sometimes you do. But whatever that image is, it also needs to be consistent, because if I was going to change or, now I just want to do tax things or, you need to be consistent in your marketing. And marketing, if it's done on a broader base, I think for me, it has a longer impact. If instead of just, I put an ad for a week or something like that. I mean, when you do the bigger things and you reach a bigger audience, it doesn't mean everybody's going to call you that day. But I think that it's that name recognition and some of the other things that people use in marketing. I think what was hard is that during COVID, a lot of events that, I looked forward to and I would take my office or we would sponsor them, or just being out with everybody home, it was different because a lot of things shifted. So how do you now reach people on the internet? And we weren't very aggressive on it. But I think that a lot of companies had to change to more social media for marketing, due to COVID.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. Gretchen, I'll turn to you to ask those questions.
Yeah, so I'm taking over to ask. We only have one question. So while I'm asking this and Pam is answering, make sure that if you have a question, you're typing that in the Q&A box. And if you have any issues with the Q&A box, you can certainly put it in the chat. I'll be looking at both. So we do have a great question to start with, Pam. What advice can you give to someone who wants to be a leader, but their anxiety is holding them back?
Yes, I completely understand that. Like I said, I think that that confidence or that it's something that's definitely very common. I think a lot of people have it and probably don't even ask about it. I think that like little things you can do is that, take deep breaths before you go in or before you have to do anything. Try to manage the anxiety between you and somebody you feel comfortable with, or just take some alone time to try to calm yourself. I think even if you have anxiety, doesn't mean you can't be a great leader. I think it's just going to take time to develop the skill and how I manage that anxiety. And if a lot of times the source of the anxiety for most leaders is the fear, right? Or the lack of confidence, or that you're unsure of doing stuff. So I think in time, don't let anxiety hold you back, because I think it's something that's workable. And I think that in time it could, if you continue to work at it, figure out what the root of that is, know that you're in that position for a reason, and try to have some of that confidence to kind of maybe, what's the word I'm trying to think, dissolve some of that fear, and possibly that anxiety could subside a little bit. I mean, it's not a cure-all, and I also think it's going to take time, because, if you're anxious for something, everybody's anxious for a different reason, and it's going to depend on how you work it through, on what kind of result you could get.
Thanks, Pam. So how did you find your why?
I've had several epiphany moments, if you will, in my life. I feel that it changes too. Like I said before, I really, at least for me, I see that I'm not a person that, if I was in the same jobs doing the same thing every day, I'm not that kind of person. I don't think most people are, actually, when you get to know them, or what their desires are. My why is because I wanted to, at first I started, my why changed. And like I said, in the beginning, I was a single mom. My why was, I just gotten downsized from a sales job, and I never wanted that to happen again. I wanted to have something I could count on for me and my son forever. And if you teach the entrepreneur classes, as you know, with entrepreneur classes, there's no guarantees of anything. So much for that theory, right? That I was going to be okay. But the why was, I wanted to do this for my son and take care of me and him as a family, and to show him that you could do it. And then the why kind of changed, as he got older, the why changed to, oh, I want to help a broader base of people. Like, if I was able to get through and do these things, then other people can too. And then, now the shift for me is, the why is, I want to empower people so that they all feel leveled up, and whatever that means to them. And I want them to have that confidence and start trying to breed that even earlier than when I felt it was okay to be who you want to be. So the why changes for me. I don't know, not a direct answer, but it's attorney. Anytime you ask an attorney question, it depends, or there's 5 answers. So, right.
So specific question to Lakeland. So how old were you when you started the program here at Lakeland, and how long did it take you?
Oh gosh, I'm probably not the best example, because I'm very not work-life balance. Like I said, I can practice it. So I went back to Lakeland, and I think I just turned 27, and I went day and night, literally took 20 to 24 credit hours. And so let me see, that would be 97 to 2003. In 6 years, I had finished my associates, my bachelor's, my master's, my law degree. I'm not normal. I'm just saying. Because I went to school all year round, and then I cleaned houses and ran pizzas at night, and I'm not normal. Like, so my example is probably not good.
But you get applause from me, because that's incredible. That's incredible.
And then I was so mad, because I came back in 97 to Lakeland, and I did try to go to school right out of high school. And none of those credits would transfer. And I was like, what? So I did kind of have to start over. But I wasn't far into Lakeland, and I'd found about the 2+2, and the right people were in my life, so that, I could kind of make sure things lined up, so I didn't have to repeat too much. So, and then somebody, Dr. Steinbacher, she's now deceased, but she encouraged me, well, you might as well get your master's. And I was like, for what? And I did go a semester longer, like in law school, as you know, is 3 years. So I went like 3.5, because the master's is an extra year tacked on. So I went a summer and then the fall. So I graduated in December of 2003 instead of May. But yeah, so I don't know if that really helps. That's not a good example.
Yeah,
I'm a
when do
little
you sleep,
crazy.
Pam? When do you sleep?
Want to get it done.
So tell us the scariest part of starting your own business.
If they'll come, right? Like, if they're going to buy your product, if the phone's going to ring. Because I think all of us can come up with ideas of something to sell or something to do. I think the scariest thing is if you're actually going to have clients or customers. How's that money going to come in? And it is scary. It's a real thing. I think that during the pandemic, everybody thought that, you're right back to square one, like what's going to happen and where's the money going to come from. But to me, that's the scariest thing, is the cash flow. And what I realize is that for my own self, again, I already shared that I was a single mom going through school. So it's not like there's pounds of money and piles of money rather everywhere. So if I start to stress about money, I really, for myself, I kind of have to go in this own little mode with God, because I made a commitment a long time ago. I think I'm always going to be okay. And so when I start to stress about money, it's usually because something else is going on, because I've been, like I said, I work without a net. God's always taking care of me. I'm always gonna be able to pay my bills. I'm always gonna be able to pay for food. But for me, every so often I go, oh my gosh. And then you're like, you have how many clients right now? And still, I would still worry about money. So I think money is a very realistic fear of where they're going to come from. But at the same time, I think if you're doing the right thing, it'll come. And I know that sounds very out there and faith-based, and there's no numbers, but it works. It really does work.
I'm with you. I totally agree with you. So let's talk about failure, if you don't mind. How do you handle it? How do you handle failure? Because we've all been there, right? Not everything works.
Right.
And then once you realize something has not been what you thought it would be, how do you try to avoid that in the future? So what are your thoughts on that?
So failure at the beginning, for sure, beginning of being out on my own, I thought failure is a bad thing, right? Like I can't fail. And then if employees make a mistake, I know you're supposed to look at this in a way that I failed them because perhaps I didn't train them. And I really struggled with that level of failure in the beginning, because I thought, no, the fact that you typed something wrong or put a comma wrong or didn't send enough copies, that's not failure. You're just being stupid. And it's like, no. What's causing them to overlook those details? So I felt like maybe it was, as you know, I can get pretty hyper and everything. So I have to slow down. And failure of employees' mistakes is maybe because I'm pushing or things in the atmosphere. And so I had to look at that. Another big failure is that I'm very trustworthy. And while I say it's faith-based and so on, you also have to remember that we're still in the real world. So one of the failures is that I went to buy a practice, and I don't know, I guess I just trying to believe people or trust people or what have you. And I did put everything in writing, and I'm a lawyer, but I didn't. And it caused a huge financial hit, because what was represented versus what actually happened was two different things. So that was a failure, because it was a huge financial hit for me. And I didn't put it in writing. And when I teach, I always say, don't sign anything you don't know. And, if you don't know, don't sign it. Anything you say has to be in writing. And, I did that, and it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so to me, that was a failure, because that purchase was nothing. I mean, it was just paper crap. But that was a failure. And it was me trying to be, I don't want to say too trustworthy, but you need to be cautious and you need to protect yourself, and you need to remember that. So while I'm saying, faith and the fear, as a business person, there's still that you have to make that delineation to run a business properly. I mean, you still have to have numbers, you still have to, do certain matrix to make sure you make it. And then another failure, which I don't know if it was a failure, but the most recent thing I kind of beat myself up for, is right before COVID, I was going to buy a building. And we'd done all the paperwork, and I was kind of mad because the fire chief, I think it is, or some fire inspector, wouldn't go and do the final thing so that we could close on it. And I was like, oh my God, I just need to make plans. I need to know we're moving and I'm consolidating or whatever. And he never did that. And then COVID came. And then the guy who was selling it said he needed that building for financing, so he can't sell it. And I kind of feel like maybe that was a God thing, like just kind of shutting the door for me. But I felt like a failure because if I make a plan, I need to stick to it and I need to get it done. And that's a failure thing for me, because it doesn't always work out the way we think it's going to. But by God, if I said it was going to happen, like, let's just make it happen. And it doesn't always do that. So to me, that was a failure. I think when you're a leader too, if anything happens in the office or anything happens in the other business, it's me, even if it's really them. We know it's usually really them, but even if it's me, like I'm the leader, I have to take the fall for that, and I have to defend my employees, you know, whatever the failures are, and then you try to work through it. So, I mean, I've had definitely some failures in business, but you learn from them, like I said, and just put things in writing, like simple things. I mean, that's why I kind of beat myself up about it, but it is what it is.
So we've got a minute for one final question. Okay, and then I remind folks about a couple of things coming up here before the end of the semester. So that final question is, was leadership something you had to learn or practice, or do you feel that more you had some of these built-in characteristics already of being a leader before you even started your career? What are your thoughts on that?
So I presented in Marion, Ohio last week, and somebody asked, are you born a leader, or is a leader something you can be made? I think the majority of leaders are somebody that's born with it. This is just my personal opinion. However, I also think if you have that yearning desire to be a leader, then there's things you can learn to do that. So I think that if you have that desire, you want to be a leader, just having that desire is enough. That's going to make you a good leader. And you just need to build on that, though. Just because you have that desire doesn't make you a good leader. I mean, I'm constantly still self-development, self-improvement. There's always different ways of styles and techniques, and, you know, even managing people or managing customer concerns or clients. There's always everybody, I mean, always keep yourself open to learning. I think that a lot of the characteristics are innate and they just come with it by being born with it. But it doesn't mean, if you have that desire, that means you can also learn some possible characteristics or traits, and maybe you could be a leader as well.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks so much for being with me. I really appreciate you sharing
Thank you.
the past hour with us and the incredible advice you've given all of our students and attendees today. So thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're able to join us. Thank you, Pam, again. We love when we have such success stories like you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for giving back to Lakeland, and we wish you the best of success moving forward, and make sure you are doing that work-life balance. Okay, take time.
That's right. That's right.
So I want to echo, thank you very much, Pam. Your insights really were wonderful, and you have such credibility as a Lakeland graduate. So thank you. And I want to thank all of our attendees for coming, but I also want to thank those that asked questions, because those questions were very, very good questions. So thank you.